Hi everyone, hope you guys are doing well today. So today's video is going to be about why you're not stepping into your higher timelines and what is actually preventing that. So I drew a little diagram here, and I want to show where you're probably getting stuck. I think it's where most people get stuck, um, and I think it's probably a missing part of this process that you're not aware of. That's probably the most important part that not a lot of people talk about. So I'm going to go over it really quick. So most people start at the top here, and the red represents the state that you are already in, that you've been holding for a while, and it's where um, you're most comfortable. This is like your everyday, all the states that you have. It's what makes up your day to day and how you feel and how you relate to reality. The blue little thought cloud above here is going to be the manifestation or the higher timeline that you're picturing. Um, it's what you want to bring into your life. So what happens is people will imagine this timeline, this dream scenario, whatever it is that they want up here, and they will try to think from it, right? That's what we've heard is to think from that reality, which works. Problem is when you start thinking from that reality, you start to kind of hold the state somewhat, but what happens is the blue is representing the new state that you're trying to bring in, the new timeline. It starts to sort of go to war with the red, which is your old natural dominant state that you've been living in. Now, what happens when why this happens is because the red has all these old thoughts and belief systems, and they're not compatible with the new state that you want to step into, especially if it's a big leap, like if you're going from um, believing that you can't have love or something and you want like a perfect harmonious relationship and you've never had one and it seems like you believe that it's so far away, right? Or living somewhere where you just think it's like absolutely not possible. What the problem with that is there are way deeper beliefs going on that are the reason that you don't have that thing and you're not in that sort of space and timeline. And when that's happening, when you try to bring in these visualizations and you're holding these new states and everything, it becomes really uncomfortable because these red old states are pretty much just going head to head with the new ones, with the new beliefs that are the new beliefs that would be carried through with the blue state, the newer state. And so it's kind of like trying to mix oil and water. And what happens, this is the most important part right here, is that what most people get stuck on is that they can't maintain this blue state because it's so uncomfortable. Because the jump from the red to the blue is usually pretty big for people. They don't usually pick like something that is a very small step. So like if you're making, like a certain amount of money a month, just like a little bit more, if you're trying to manifest like a little bit more for the month or something, um, that's not a very big step. But most people don't do that. They try to go for really big manifestations or really big shifts in their realities. And when you try to do that, you're really going from like a totally different set of beliefs here, um, to like these ideal beliefs that they just like do not match up. They just go to war with each other. And what starts to happen, and you've probably noticed this if you've been trying to bring something in for a long time, is you start all these all of these emotions and beliefs that are tied to this red state start to really get intensified, and they start to really um all the really deep issues that are the reason you're up here start to really come up. And a lot of the problems, the really dark beliefs, fears, everything that's not who you really are, but has been something like a almost like a suit that you've been wearing, all of that stuff starts to become intensified because this new blue state is basically uprooting everything that you're used to, and it's shining a light on all the stuff that is preventing this blue state from anchoring in and becoming your new identity. Because that's really what it is like if you've noticed, if you've ever tried to really bring in a big change like this, you'll notice that it really does feel like you're becoming a different person. And that is very difficult to make that shift because you're basically stripping clean everything from up here, which is everything you've been used to for years, sometimes since you were a kid, decades maybe even. And it's really not comfortable. And the other problem with that is that not only is it not comfortable, but it also, everything that was in here that was causing this red state starts to just like become extremely intensified. It starts to just, um, like I said, it's a light being shown on it, and it becomes very, very difficult to hold on to this blue state when all that stuff is coming up. And so what happens is you start this sort of back and forth of trying to hold these blue, like you're trying to hold that state while the red is trying to not only like keep its identity and not make that shift, but it's also all these things that aren't healed. That's the big point, is that it's just healing that hasn't happened. And so you're trying to make this jump to this new reality without the stuff that needs to be cleaned out being cleaned out. And so what happens here in this part of the cycle is you couldn't like hold on to the blue long enough because it's extremely difficult. And then all of the red that was just sort of dormant, and it made up your reality, but because you tried to bring in this new thing, it becomes more intensified. Like everything that was causing the state becomes more intensified, starts to get pushed up, kind of like a sliver coming to the surface. And once that happens, you start to feel like all the stuff that was causing this. So if you're here and you want to change, you probably don't like the situation that you're in here and like whatever's causing that. So let's say that this state, there's a bunch of like uh fear and shame that starts coming up that's extremely intense and uncomfortable. And when you're feeling that, it's like trying to maintain this new state when all of that starts coming up is unbelievably difficult. I mean, it's almost impossible. And that everyone tries to make it sound so easy to like manifestation or stepping into new timelines and stuff is so easy. It's like it's not. If you're trying to make really big changes, it takes a lot of conscious effort to really look at the wounds that are causing you to be in this state. You have to. If you want to make really big leaps, if you want to make smaller leaps and gradually build up to the blue state, but you're like taking, like I said earlier, just small steps, small little steps towards the other state, that is going to be more comfortable, but it's not what most people do. And it's also not, I actually don't think it works that well because your true desire is here, right? So your true desire isn't like one little step usually. So when someone's true desire and their what they feel is authentic, when it's when that's not what they're trying to bring in, they're just trying to bring one step towards it, they're usually not motivated to stay in that state at all, because like, oh well, that's just a little bit better than my situation, why would I spend time trying to bring that in and focusing on that? I want to focus on the big picture stuff that really makes me feel great, and it's really what I want. And so this is where people get stuck, is they try to bring this in and they can't hold on to it because they're battling with their old self. All of these wounds start coming up and they don't know what to do because you're just told to stay in the new state and don't worry about that stuff. But you really need to make conscious effort to look at what's coming up. And this is the missing part here, is to really notice these big wounds that are causing your normal dominant state, and pay attention to them and really go in and be willing to work with them and heal them. Because only by allowing the the deeper wounds that are causing this state, only by allowing those to dissipate and dissolve, do you get room for the blue new state to actually come in. Because if you don't do this, what happens is, a lot of people will talk about like that they're getting the opposite of what they're trying to bring in, right? Like if they're trying to bring in more money, they all of a sudden they start, like, more bills start coming in, or they become, things get harder financially. What I think is going on here is that they're trying to hold these higher states, where they're more abundant. It starts uprooting all these really intense fears around money, all whatever's causing it, right? It can be anything. And then like this becomes their new focus. Like it's basically they're amplifying their normal old state and making it super intensified. So then they might fall into the trap of like, um, fixating on all of these. They're not trying to actually heal the wounding that's coming up. They just all of a sudden they get trapped in like the actual energy of it, and they're not letting it, um, resolve. They're just stuck in it, and then because they're stuck in it, it's actually like putting a magnifying glass on their normal state, their old state. And so yeah, they start bringing in, um, more financial hardships, for that example, or more bills or whatever. So this is sort of the missing piece here, is that you have to do the inner work while you're bringing in this state. So the biggest thing is, like, you can do this, you can bring in this new state, but you have to understand that you're going to be uncomfortable. It's not comfortable to shift identities. It's extremely uncomfortable, and there's going to be a lot of pain that comes up, a lot of energy that needs to be dealt with. Because if not, you're just going to go straight back to your old state. You're probably going to deal with more intense negative circumstances because you're not allowing the energy to move. You're just stuck in that, those wounding again, and you're putting a magnifying glass on it because you're trying to uproot it. Then you get trapped there, and then you go right back to your dominant old self. So what really needs to happen is you need to be holding this state as much as you can, practicing really stepping into embodying the the self that is there. And the easiest way for me to do this is to, you imagine that there's infinite timelines, there's infinite different, realities, and all you're doing is embodying the self that has everything that you want. And I don't, to me, it doesn't matter if it's first or third person or any of that stuff. It's just, it's really the energy behind it. What happens, what you'll notice, is that when you go to embody this energy, if it is really, really conflicted with your older state, the second that you go to embody this, or maybe like throughout the day after you've tried to hold this, you might feel really good at first when you're holding this new state, but all of a sudden you're going to feel really, really bad because all of this older stuff it gets pushed to the surface while trying to hold this newer state. And you can actually, it's this weird sort of cycle that happens where you feel really good from your new state, and then it's like, oh no, but all of these old wounds are reminding me I have to feel this way and I have to feel bad about this stuff. And then you get trapped here, it becomes intensified, and then you fall back, right? So what we want to do is actually hold this new state, and while we're holding this new state, we pay attention to all of those negative emotions and wounding coming up, and we're actually going to acknowledge that, okay? You don't need to worry about this, like spending time with the stuff that comes up. You don't need to worry about that, blocking your manifestation. All you need to worry about really is holding this state, and then all of these old wounds are going to become really intense, and it's going to make you look at them. You can't, it's going to be so intense you can't just ignore it, right? So you have to spend time with it. And when you do that, you're just opening up to all of the energy that's coming up from those wounds. And when you do that, it slowly starts to dissolve. And then when this slowly starts to get like less and less and less and less and less, then it's like you're allowing more room for the blue to come in, like that's giving you more space for this to come in. And by doing this over and over and over again, because this process happens again and again and again, you have to be doing, this is where the work is done, and this is how you get to the new spot and where you want to go. Because when you don't when you're not like going to this place and allowing that stuff to really release, you're just going to go right back, right? So you need to take the time to spend time with everything that's coming up, and you need to be conscious about opening up to it so that it can actually be energetically released. And by doing that, you're not going to be able to do this all at once, by the way, especially if like the new state you want, the new timeline and everything is vastly different. You probably have a ton of stuff that needs to be worked through. But when you are conscious of this process, you start to you start to hold this, right? This stuff comes up, it becomes really intense. You spend time with it, you realize that this is part of the clearing process, this is part of getting where you want to be. And then it's actually a good sign that it's coming up, because when it does come up, it means, oh, yeah, this is the reason why I don't have what I want and I'm not where I want. And then once you do that, it becomes a little bit less. And when it becomes a little bit less, when you go back to holding this state. Once you move through a little bit of that, it starts to kind of calm down, right? It's not as intense. You go back to kind of like just feeling okay. You bring back in the new state that you want. And then the same thing will happen. You'll get triggered and your your wounding will come up again, but it won't be as intense this time. It'll be less intense. And that's a sign that you are moving towards your new place, because you cannot hold this new state at all if there is too much red here. If this is the dominant, like if there's too much energy in this old state and there's too much wounding, you won't be able to maintain this. Like you can't think that you're going to hold this new timeline that you want and you'll just like hold it long enough and then you'll get it and you won't have to worry about any of the pain and the old wounding and all the stuff involved with that original old state. It's, you have to move through it. You have to work through it. And what I've found is this is the best way, is to really go, it's that back and forth between these two of holding it, it comes up, you open up and heal the energy, and then it dissipates, it doesn't become as intense. You move through that sort of cycle of it, and then you go back to holding the blue state, the new state, and then it's just rinse and repeat, really. And eventually you get rid of like all of the red, or it's very, very little. It takes a while to get rid of all of it, but it becomes very, very little. And eventually the blue becomes your dominant state, and you can still have some of the old wounds from here. Like, it's not going to be 100% clear when the blue state, the new state, finally anchors in, but it you do need to create enough room, enough space for this to anchor in. And the only way that happens is from that back and forth. um so yeah, that's what I think a lot of people miss when they're trying to bring in newer states. And as far as the healing goes, I have a free 11-step guide that's really easy if you're new to healing or you're new to opening up to those energies. I'll put in the description. But you have to get used to this process. If you want to really change stuff in your life and shift timelines and shift realities, you have to make that a you have to prioritize the healing. There's no other way around it. And it becomes really discouraging when you see a lot of people online just say, "Oh, it's so easy to just get whatever you want. It's like, well, the process of timelines and shifting realities and manifestation, the energetic process is simple, but it's not easy. It's not easy to uproot decades worth of beliefs and fears. And, a lot of these emotions are really, really dense. They're not easy to move through. A lot of fear, shame, guilt, anger, whatever, right? They're not easy to actually move through those states. But a lot of people act like it's just, you can just completely change your world in the blink of an eye. But in my experience, it doesn't. It takes a lot of really intense inner work. And I think that this is where the real success lies, and that's the missing piece for most people. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll probably be making some more videos on this topic. And there's the free guide down below if you want to actually learn how to do the healing yourself. And good luck, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.